So I'm Anna Galetli, and we are starting part C of Unit 3, and we're going to focus in on the cranial nerves now. All right, on this slide, I have given you two mnemonic devices to help you remember the cranial nerves. So this is olfactory, optic, ocular motor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibular-cochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, awesome, and hypoglosso. Now, if you would like to go and find some racier versions of these mnemonic devices, you can Google that. These are the clean ones. What you need to know about these, first of all, they are all given Roman numerals, all right? And it's basically kind of an anterior to posterior inferior pattern, and we'll look at that in just a second. You do need to know the Roman numeral. You also need to know the name. Now, let's see. We're going to do this for the ones that are fully sensory. So if you remember with the spinal nerves, they were always mixed nerves, so that they always had sensory motor fibers in it. With the cranial nerves, it's not always true. We have some that only have sensory fibers in them, and we have some that only have motor fibers in them. All right, so you should know that as well, okay? Then you have trigeminal, facial, glossopharyngeal, and vagus, which are truly mixed with sensory and motor within their nerve packages. All right, next slide. All right, so on here, we are looking at the bottom, the inferior aspect of your, brain, and you'll see I've drawn some eyes so that you can see where the anterior part of the eyes are, okay? And then down here is the posterior or the back, okay? Now, with these, again, we're doing Roman numerals. Now, you'll notice that I don't have the Roman numeral on that one because we're highlighting the olfactory bulb, and then this is the olfactory tract, okay? The nerves actually sprout out of the bulbs and then go down into the nasal mucosa, so you don't actually see them. But these are cranial nerve Roman numeral 1, all right? Then you see the optic nerve here. Now these fibers go in this direction. This area is called the optic chiasma, and then these two things are the optic tract. Now we've got the ocular motor right here. We've got the trigeminal. We have, the trochlear. We have the trigeminal here. Then you have number 5, abducens. All right, and then this is also number 5, abducens, okay? And then you've got 6 for facial, and I'm switching to Phoenician numerals because there's not enough room to do the Roman numerals. And then you've got, there's 6, 5, trigeminal is 5, abducens is 6, so this is 6. Sorry. All right, and then facial is 7, vestibular-cochlear is 8, glossopharyngeal is 9. We have 10, we'll switch back to Roman numerals for vagus. And then we have accessory, which is 11, and then hypoglossal, which is 12. Now look at the names. They give you information. So optic nerve, you know optic is eye. Oculomotor, eye, motor. So this is telling you it's going to the eye and that it's only going to be motor. Trochlear and trigeminal aren't very helpful. They do have reasons they're named that, but we're not going to go into it. Abducens, the same thing. Facial is going towards the face. Vestibulo-cochlear. Vestibulo is balance, and cochlear is hearing. Glossopharyngeal. So glossal is tongue. Pharyngeal is your throat. Okay? Vagus, weird name. Accessory, real name. Hypoglossal, below tongue. Okay? You will also notice that the numbering went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So basically anterior to posterior. And then once you get to the brainstem, it kind of goes from midline down in this direction and then back up here to this weirdo. So just try to remember that. The one thing I'm doing when I'm trying to determine the cranial nerves, unless it's one that's really obvious, like this one or this one, is before I do anything, I number it. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I'll write on it, I'll light, and then I'll try to figure out which one it is because it's really easy down here to get them mixed up. Okay, so number them every single time, it helps. All right, so what do I want you to know for each of these? So we're looking at the olfactory nerve. I want you to know the pathway. So I've got my tract, I've got the bulb right here, and then the olfactory nerves, you'll remember that they go through, we've had to learn this feature already, the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. Now you know why I wanted you to know it, was for this particular nerve. So it's coming down here and going to the nasal mucosa. You'll notice in all the yellow boxes, I give their basic location, or you can think of that as their pathway to get from the brain to whatever structure they're doing. And then I give you their action or their function. So you know that this is for smell and that it's sensory, okay? Here we're looking at number 2, all right? So you've got the optic nerve coming from the eyeballs. Notice that they cross at the optic chiasma, okay? And then they go into the optic tract, which is going to head towards the thalamus. That synapse is here, and then it comes down to the visual cortex. So there's your yellow box. That's what you need to know. All right, cranial nerve number 3 is the ocular motor. So you have your pathway up there, all right? So it's going through here, all right? And then it's going to go through the orbital fissure of the sphenoid and then go to most, but not all, of the motor nerve, the muscles, the extrinsic eye muscles, okay? And it's going to move them. Now you'll notice I've got this for autonomic. So it does voluntary eye movement, but it also has autonomic fibers that are going to do involuntary for pupil constriction and lens focusing. Okay, so you need to know that. So you know pathway or location and the action of what they do. All right, trochlear, all right, also coming over here off of the midbrain, going through the orbital fissure. It comes to a single muscle, the superior oblique. So this is like seriously overkill for this cranial nerve. It's going to one muscle and that's all it does. Trigeminal nerve, all right, you will see over here, I've got the information that you need. It's the most important sensory nerve of the face. It goes through the foramen ovale and the foramen rotundum. You'll remember that you had to learn those on the sphenoid. That was Farmer-Ross, R-O-S, rotundum ovale spinosum. Okay, so it's going to go through those areas on the sphenoid, and then it's going to branch to different areas of the face. And it does both sensory and motor. So from a lot of the face and head, it's doing sensory. For the mandible, it's helped controlling these muscles down here, okay? 3 divisions, I don't necessarily care if you remember those. Over here, I kind of like this picture because it kind of shows you how the 3 branches are innervating the different sections, okay? All right, so next slide. All right, abducens is another one of those overkill cranial nerves where it's coming up and it's going to the single lateral rectus muscle, and that's all it does. All right, facial, you've got more stuff going on with this nerve. It's motor, sensory. I've got information on what kind of damage it can cause. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some of the pictures. All right, so you will remember on the temporal bone, you have an external auditory meatus, but you also have an internal auditory meatus. And through the internal auditory meatus, you have the cranial nerve vestibulocochlear, but also the facial nerve, okay? So it's going to go through that hole over in here, and then it's going to come out and it's going to start doing these different branches. And over here, we've got 5 divisions, temporal, zygomatic, buccal, mandibular, cervical. It tells you basically where it's going. I'm not going to ask you to identify the divisions. That's just for your information. Now, these are the actions. So facial expressions, all right, that's motor. Lacrimal and salivary gland secretions, that's also motor but autonomic. And then sensory for the taste buds, okay? All right, now we are on to cranial nerve number 8, vestibulocochlear. So this is going to come off. It's also going through the internal auditory meatus through the temporal bone, and then it splits into the vestibular nerve and the cochlear nerve. Okay, so the cochlear nerve is going to do hearing, and the vestibular nerve is going to do balance. Okay, and that information is all located right there. All right, so now we're looking at glossopharyngeal. So glossal being tongue, pharyngeal being throat. So what you need to know is location. So it's going to go through the jugular foramen, and then it's going to split off, and you're going to have branches that go towards the parotid gland for salivation. It's going to go up into the upper or oral cavity, and then down towards the muscles of the throat. So it does both motor and sensory. So this is the sensory. So it's controlling, it's sensing sensations in the tongue base and the oral cavity. Now this is all motor. This is voluntary, and autonomic is involuntary. So it's going to control muscles. So this is motor, and then it's going to control the secretion of saliva in your parotid gland, which is also motor but autonomic. All right, the vagus is probably one of the most important cranial nerves for you to remember for A&P2, Patho 2, okay? It also goes through that jugular foramen, so you got a lot of stuff going through that jugular foramen besides just the internal jugular vein. Now, this cranial nerve is the only one that extends all the way down into the abdominal cavity, okay? It is primarily autonomic, and it's doing autonomic for the organs in the thoracic cavity and the abdominal viscera, okay? Now, it's not just doing motor, it also has a lot of sensory components to it, okay? So again, it's the only one that extends past the head neck, and it's really big and easy to see in a cadaver, so you should definitely look at it in the APR. All right, so now we are on to the accessory nerve, again, going through the jugular foramen. It's kind of interesting because it splits and it joins up with some motor fibers from the spinal nerves, and then it's got areas that are considered cranial fibers that join up with the vagus nerve to go towards the throat. And basically what you see is, so you've got components of it coming from up here, and then they come up, and then those fibers from the accessory. So you've got both cranial origin and spinal cord origin for this accessory nerve. Okay, so this is the accessory, but you can see it's donating fibers. Sorry, this up here was, not that. That was vagus. So you got origin off of the brain, okay, and origin off of the spinal cord coming up, and then giving portions to the vagus, accessory, and then portions over here to the vagus, okay? So what does it do? It provides motor innervation to sternocleidomastoid and trapezius, and then other muscles of the throat where it's joining up with the vagus, okay? All right, so number 12 is your hypoglosso. So hypo is below, glossal is tongue. So look where it is, it's below the tongue. It is going through the hypoglossal canal. We had to learn that when we did the skull features, okay? So you learned that already. It's right next to your foramen magnum. And it's going to go up and give fibers to the different parts of your tongue region so that you can move your tongue around and talk. All right, so the next two slides are photos that I have taken of our brainstem model that we use in the lab. And this is a really hard model for people to wrap their head around because basically we've taken the brainstem and made it really big and gotten rid of all the little distractors. So we have a little bit of the diencephalon up here with the thalamus and the corpus callosum. What I would like you to do is to print this out, write on it, and you don't have the optic, the olfactory present. But you can start doing this. So you've got that, okay? I've got number 3 for ocular motor. I've got 4 for trochlear. I've got 5 for trigeminal. And then just go through and start marking them. Do this, number them, then go through and say the numbers and the words, then erase the whole thing, and then start over, okay? And again, what you'll see is you start here, and you work your way down that way. And then once you get into here, this area, you start from the midline, and you work your way out kind of like that, okay? And then kind of going down as well. So there is a pattern. All right, so this slide, so this is the back of the brainstem, and I just wanted you to have the features in case you're using this in other classes, or in case you, I don't know why. But anyway, I went ahead and I labeled all the others. Ooh, I should have put this in the brain, the last module, which you did on the brain, where you can see the, the corpora quadrigeminea and the cerebral aqueduct and all that stuff. So anyway, it's labeled in case you want it. All right, so this is a picture of one of our brains that we use in the lab. They have something similar in the practice atlas. What I like about this is they go through and they already label it. So they've got one labeled here. Now this is a little misleading because remember that this is technically the olfactory tract. This is the bulb, and cranial nerve 1 comes out of the bulb. So just remember that. Then you can see number 2, and then it's a little hard. There's some damage right there. You can't really see it. There's 3, all right, and so you can just see some of the numbering, okay? And that's all I was showing you on that. And that is this is the end of part C of the Unit 3 video lectures.